want to thank everyone for showing up on this beautiful Labor Day in order to show your respects and honor to our past and to use their inspiration to keep the fight alive. And I got to say, the Labor History Society, over its almost 25-year history, has done a lot of things. This is the first time we've ever created a traffic jam in a cemetery. But, our next speaker is someone that a lot of us see. Unlike other labor leaders before him who had much better economic times, times of growth and prosperity, he's been given the almost unbelievable task of trying to hold the line because our standard of living is under attack. George Nee was a community organizer, and already you're starting to put that together. Dwayne was and George was. You start to see where this is going. George was also the founder of the Rhode Island Workers Union Local 76 a long time ago. Some of those unions are still existing today. And over the years, he worked his way up the ladder of success and achievement at the Rhode Island AFL-CIO. And today, he's president of that organization. And he was also instrumental, along with Bob, in helping us put this beautiful monument up. George, come on up.
And thank you all for coming here today. I think that there really isn't a more important place for us to be on Labor Day than here. To honor and remember those people, these 4 strikers and the others that were involved in this strike and all workers, who gave their lives so that we can stand here today to remember them, to honor them, and to recommit ourselves to the fight for justice and for economic opportunity for all the workers in our country and in our world. Things have changed a lot since this day in 1934, and they've changed a lot because of this fight and other fights where people struggle. We now have a social safety network that is frayed but is still there. We have a minimum wage, we have OSHA standards, we have unemployment insurance, we have workers' compensation, we have programs that help workers, and we have the right to organize. In 1934, when this massacre, and it was a massacre, took place, workers did not have the legal right to organize. They had the moral right to organize, and they exercised it, but they did not have the legal right to organize. So things have changed a lot, but they haven't changed much at all. Because what they fought for and were fighting for on that day and in that year is still going on today. I mean, what are we all about when it really comes down to it? We should try to not get caught up in the more complicated things, but keep it simple. We are about workers having the right to have a say on their job. We are about workers having the right to have control over their lives and not have their lives controlled by, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt referred to them, the economic royalists. We have a right to control our own life. We have a right to have a say on our job. And yes, we have a right and an obligation and a duty to fight for better wages, for better benefits, and better working conditions, and we should never be ashamed of that. We should stand up proudly to say, yes, our families have a right to economic security and a good wage and good benefits. We can't run away from that. If we run away from that, then why are we here today? We dishonor these people and all workers who fought and struggled. Sometimes there's a lot of rhetoric about this, but we have to remember that people actually got beat and killed and got shot and sacrificed and walked on picket lines. and fought for their brothers and sisters to get a better life. That is what we are doing here today. We are honoring all those people. And we have an obligation, all of us, and every member of this labor movement, to go forward, to never retreat, to improve the lives of working people. That is our obligation, and that is our duty. And I have a crazy idea that I came up today with.
Hey.
Like those.
Wait till you hear this one. I think it is disgraceful that our airport is named after Theodore Francis.
Yeah!
How can we name an airport after a governor who called out the National Guard and shot and killed those 4 workers?
Yeah, you're right.
Why don't we have the Tom Policastro Airport, the Ed McElroy Airport, the Ed Brown Airport, the Frank Montanaro Airport? Let's get rid of the Theodore Francis Green Airport.
Yeah.
Let's name it after a worker. So that when people ride and get into Rhode Island, they'll scratch their heads a little bit and say, who are those people? And then maybe the union flight attendant can have an announcement, and the union pilot can say, you're coming to a state that honors workers who fought so that others can live a better life. Thank you very much.
You have to remember that back in 1934, when this strike broke out, there were thousands of people in the streets. And when you look at those people, because they do have the newsreels and the footage of that, they were mostly young people in their early 20s. Just kids out trying to make a better life for themselves and to help their families make ends meet during the middle of the Great Depression. We often forget that. And as Dwayne so aptly pointed out, of the 5 or 6 major national strikes in 1934, none of them really could be declared a victory. There was a compromise, there was a standoff, there was 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But 1934 was a year of decision, make no doubt about that, for organized labor. Because since the mid-1920s down through the middle of the Great Depression, labor had almost been extinguished. We were a flickering light in a darkened room ready to go out. But the movement, especially here in the textile strike, which was run by 2 guys from Rhode Island, by the way, that roiled the waters, that brought people into action, people onto the streets. People began to participate and fight back. They were no longer people acted upon. They were going to be actors on the front of the stage. And although we can stand here today in a beautiful atmosphere, sunshine, blue skies, all we have to do is turn around and look about 4 rows down. And you'll see that headstone with 2 holes through it. Those weren't rifles that shot those holes. Those weren't pistols. Those were machine gun bullets trained on our ancestors. And that headstone happened to be very thin, and the bullets went right through it. But you know, if you look at that long enough, those 2 bullet holes begin to look like eyes. The eyes of history, looking upon what's happened over the last 76 years. And we saw that after 1934, that within a couple of years, the great Congress of Industrial Organization was formed. A union that was inclusive, that brought in women, people of color, immigrants, so that the labor movement reflected the entire workforce, not just a handful of skilled workers. And by World War II, we had finally taken our place and helped the working class in the next 10, 20, 30 years graduate from the working class into the middle class. And the only sad thing about that was that our parents and grandparents, for the most part, did not sit us down and tell us the story of what they went through and how they got out of that mess. Because it was labor that pulled them up. No one else. We pulled ourselves up through the instrumentality of organized labor. And in World War II, which is where I'm going to stop, most of you say, oh God, a history professor, he'll never stop. But in World War II, in that worst conflagration in world history, we sent our troops off to the Pacific, to the Atlantic, and 300,000 of them paid the ultimate sacrifice in dying for our country. But what's often forgotten is that back home, the soldiers of production, the men and women who were still here, turning out the materiel, because you can't win a war simply with troops. You have to have a lot of other things to back it up. And so tens of thousands of people who've never worked before in their lives, found opportunities in the factories. But you know what we never hear about? 100,000 American workers died in industrial accidents during that war. 100,000 died at home. 300,000 died on the battlefields of Europe and Asia. And yet the troops came home to a deserved applause, while working people were soon forgotten, regardless of their major contributions. But we kept it going so that once we had a union card in our wallet or in our pocketbook, it was a ticket to a better life, to public education, public higher education. I always kid my students by telling them, by 1950, there was finally more students at URI than cows. And the last cow a fraternity got not too long ago, so they're gone. In ending up, let me say, many years ago, there was a major strike right down the road here in Pawtucket, right on Dexter Street, by the streetcar workers. And the mayor of Pawtucket at that time was a guy named John Fitzgerald. He was a great union guy, a great lawyer, a wonderful person. But when the Republican Party sent in the sheriffs, when the governor called out the state militia, he deputized strikers in order to keep law and order. Now that's the kind of politician we need today. But John Fitzgerald, oh, he had a way like some of the Irish do with the turn of the phrase. He said, we celebrate Memorial Day for our victories over our foreign enemies. And we celebrate Labor Day for our victories over our domestic enemies. Solidarity for us!